in collaboration with the Cyprus Mail. This is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Charalambous.
Coming up this week, the Evergreen Golden Oak project.
Every ticket that we sell will be one tree. So we're hoping that a lot of people will support us and come and see the performance, and also they will have a tree that we'll be reforesting in the Limassol district. It will be announced later.
Kindness in a box, helping the needy.
The campaign has been launched from mid-October, actually the 17th of October, because it's been designed in the framework of supporting the International Day for Eradication of Poverty of the UN, and it's meant to run for a month, so until mid-November hopefully. It depends how it goes. If we have applications, we're not going to reject them.
Egypt's foreign minister visits Cyprus for a trilateral meeting.
To become a model in the Eastern Mediterranean that will address the challenges that exist, that will attract those of a common position and values to also take advantage of our common endeavour.
And the EU's anti-trafficking coordinator talks about the fight against the trade in human beings.
We have trafficking for sexual exploitation, for labor exploitation, for domestic servitude, for the purpose of organ removal, to force people to engage in criminal activities, forced begging. Unfortunately, we have a very long list. Now we hear also stories about people being forced into sham marriages.
There are all sorts of events coming up in the next few weeks to do with the Latzia project. What is it? Well, the person behind it is with us on the programme today. She is Demi da Costa. Demi, this has been going for a while, I think, as well. But tell us about the origins of it before we get into the actual events.
Basically, I use my art and my dance to show the life and death. I try to interpret that in my movements and in my choreographies. And finally, I realized that there's been a lot of burnt areas here in Cyprus, and it's very distressing for me to see the death of these trees. So a year ago, I decided to collaborate with people, Christos Michail and with Angelos Stavro, where we decided that we should create a project called the Latzia Project. The Latzia is a Cypriot name for the oak tree. So that's how we became the name of the project. From there, we thought that it would be nice to, in a different way, show a film which is also used as dance, as a dance film, basically, which shows the distress of burned forests and the disasters that happen. At the moment, we are showing it in various areas in Limassol and in Lefkosia. We're in smaller coffee shops, and we showed it at the Friends of Earth, which they've been collaborating a lot. We also created a small booklet which is called Calling the Clouds, and this booklet is also to demonstrate the disasters that have happened here in the world, basically, of how people consume, how they destroy nature without actually understanding that they're destroying it, so it's quite a disaster. After that, on the 1st and 2nd of November, we have created a dance performance which is based on a myth called Eresiphonas. And it's about a young man who goes into the forests of Dimitra, and he starts cutting her trees. And she warns him. She says to him that he doesn't need so many trees. Why should he be cutting so many? And he just continues cutting without even thinking. Eventually he gets to her tree, the sacred tree, and she asks him, please do not cut this tree, and he does. So she gets angry and puts a spell on him. And the spell is that he eats and eats and eats, and he never gets full. He never gets filled up. So he eats his house, he eats the village, he eats the next village, and eventually there's nothing more to eat, and he eats himself. So that's terrible. But it's related to today's world in a way that people consume and consume and consume, and at the end of the day, there's going to be nothing left to consume. So this is also trying to show that how we are destroying. So the project is based on this, the dance performance basically is based on today's world and showing the myth of erysiphthonus.
But the film that I've seen, it also ends on a note of hope, and there's no doubt that although we do have a terrible problem here in the summer months with forest fires, that some of the areas that have in the past been burnt are now in full bloom again almost, because it's a regeneration process, isn't it?
Yes, and also thanks to the forestry department. They've done a very good job in the sense of reforesting these areas, and we are collaborating with them too. So it's nice to be able to work with people that care for the forests.
And I think that the people who are coming to the dance performance will be contributing to the trees that you're going to plant.
Yes, every ticket that we sell will be one tree. So we're hoping that a lot of people will support us and come and see the performance, and also they will have a tree that we'll be reforesting in the Limassol district. It will be announced later, where these people and other people that have seen the film, have bought the booklet, can also come up and plant their tree.
Okay, and that's going to happen where exactly? You don't know yet?
We don't know yet. We're waiting from the forestry department to give us the area, but it will definitely be on the 16th of November. And the area will notify, hopefully by the performance date, which is the 1st and 2nd of November.
And you've got a Facebook group?
Yes, we do. And it's called the Latzia Project, Getting into the Sacred Oak.
Okay, so if people look for the Sacred Oak on Facebook, I'm sure they'll find it. Very best of luck. The more trees we have, the better, Demi.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Rosie.
Listen online to the Cyprus News Digest on YouTube or at cyprusmail.libsyn.com. The latest program is uploaded every Friday, and if you missed one, you can catch up there.
Andrea and Julia Dashin's foundation has come up with another campaign for October, and the foundation's managing director is Alina Nabieva, who joins us now. Alina, tell us all about Kindness in a Box.
Kindness in a Box is another campaign, charity campaign, which the foundation has come up with, which was designed to help persons in need specify their needs as accurately as possible in one application form, submit it to the foundation, and receive their one-off help that they've been requesting from the foundation.
Well, when we say kindness in a box, what is that? I mean, what is in the box? Is it actually a box?
That's true. This is why we came up with the name. It's meaning that you can receive kindness in one box, meaning whatever you request for has to fit in a box. That's the criteria of applying through this course. So whatever that the persons are requesting in their application form has to fit, let's say, in a, cubic meter box in order to be sent to them. They don't have to come and get it. We'll send it off to them. We've come across cases, I'll be honest, how we came up with this campaign. We come across through cases where people have been requesting for simple, basic needs, such as a kettle to boil water for tea because it's getting colder now, or let's say an iron because their kid goes to school and they need to wear a uniform. So all of these needs, we thought, how can we actually help people? Let's help them through a campaign where they would know there is a specific cause running and they can apply for it.
Is everybody eligible, or do you have to be unemployed or on social benefits?
Well, basically, you do have to be facing some kind of a financial need, definitely, because if you can afford to buy whatever in that box, someone cannot. We have to see all applications on a fair trial basis, I believe. So definitely in the form, there are a few questions which lead us as the foundation to decide whether the person really needs it or the person can go without it.
It's a very simple idea, and bearing in mind the large amounts of funding that the Foundation's given to other NGOs and so on, I suppose this one doesn't actually really cost very much, but can make a huge difference to a family's life.
That is correct. This particular cause, it does not cost, shall I say, the Foundation that much, but we do have a particular budget for it where we've estimated to help, let's say, a couple of 30 to 40 core applications a month, hopefully.
So how long will the campaign run for?
The campaign has been launched from mid-October, actually the 17th of October, because it's been designed in the framework of supporting the International Day for Eradication of Poverty of the UN. and it's meant to run for a month, so until mid-November, hopefully. It depends how it goes. If we have applications, we're not going to reject them, so let's see.
And where can people find out more?
They can find out about the cause via our website, and obviously if they call me, I'll be very open and glad to send them the application forms by email and fax as well.
And what's the number?
The number for the fax is 25246220, and the email is info@dashinfoundation.org, or they can just simply call me at 25246120.
Okay, and the website is dashinfoundation.org. Alina, thanks for joining me.
Keep up to date with events and news in Cyprus with the Cyprus News Digest. You can stream it live on mycyradio.eu, listen again on the Cyprus Mail website, or download the podcast to your phone or tablet and listen anytime, anywhere.
On Wednesday at the Foreign Ministry, Foreign Minister Ioannis Kassoulidis had a trilateral meeting with the Foreign Minister of Greece, Evangelos Venizelos, and the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Egypt, Sameh Hassan Shukri. After their meeting, they made statements to the press. This is what Mr. Shukri had to say.
Dear colleague and friend, I'm absolutely delighted to be here to participate in this trilateral meeting between Cyprus, Greece and Egypt. It is a rewarding configuration that's objective is to enhance the level of cooperation and coordination between the three countries for the benefit of their peoples, and to forge in the Eastern Mediterranean the establishment of the necessary environment for our nations to take advantage of our resources and to promote the common values and principles of mutual cooperation and stability and peace in the area that is necessary for our peoples to obtain their aspirations in terms of their development and their livelihoods. We have had an opportunity to address a wide range of issues pertaining to our trilateral areas of cooperation and also to address the various regional and international issues of mutual concern. I am happy to note that there was a consensus between us three on many of the issues that were discussed and the manner in which we should deal with the common challenges that face us. It is our desire and hope that we further consolidate and strengthen this level of trilateral cooperation, as my dear colleague has mentioned, to become a model in the Eastern Mediterranean that will address the challenges that exist, that will attract those of a common position and values to also take advantage of our common endeavor. This is a benevolent effort that is of a positive nature, and it is being provided as a model. It does not entail any form of desire to exasperate any of the regional conflicts, but on the contrary, to provide the framework and the format to address those concerns in a peaceful and cooperative nature.
Among the many other things discussed by the three foreign ministers was, of course, Turkey's incursion into Cyprus EEZ. Answering a question about whether or not it would change Egyptian policy in any way, this is how Mr. Shukri responded.
Definitely not. The cooperation that exists and the legal instruments that have been agreed between Egypt and Cyprus will be implemented in good faith and in the spirit of cooperation that exists between us and in the context of international law that governs issues related to all areas of cooperation and economic development related to the law of the sea and other international instruments. This is a principled position and one that upon which there's a strong basis of understanding and international recognition. And we are hopeful that all activity within the context of the Eastern Mediterranean will conform to international regulations and instruments and understandings that are based on good neighborly relations as a guiding principle of international relations. This is important to maintain the stability of the region, enhance the level of cooperation, for we are all serving the aspirations of our peoples and their common desire for greater economic development.
Egypt's Foreign Minister Sameh Hassan Shukri, who was on a visit to Cyprus this week.
Keep up to date with events in Cyprus and around the world with the Cyprus News Digest.
Between 2010 and 2012, EU member states registered over 30,000 victims of trafficking in human beings. It's something that the EU has been trying to deal with for many years. Miria Vassiliadou is the EU's anti-trafficking coordinator, and she joins us on the Cyprus News Digest to tell us about the latest figures. Miria, are we getting anywhere with this? You've been working so hard for many years, and yet over 30,000 victims is an awful lot of totally destroyed lives.
Thank you, Rosie. Thank you for the question. Are we getting anywhere? I would say that, first of all, the 30,000 registered victims would be only the beginning of this story. There's a lot more victims that are for sure not identified in all the member states everywhere across the EU. So we are talking about an awful lot of lives indeed. We are getting somewhere at the EU level in the sense that we have very good legislation, an EU directive that the member states have adopted. Most of the member states have notified the European Commission that they have now translated this EU law into their national law. We have a very good policy framework, and we have funding that is enabling and supports the member states' activities. So I guess the question would be, if everything is in place, why is it that we have so much trafficking? And I think our answer should be in the implementation of the EU legal framework. We have the laws, we have the tools, let's put everything into practice.
Well, a lot of countries, and I'm afraid I think Cyprus is among them, are not really following the letter of the law, are they? Is it actually a law?
Well, it is a law in the sense that it should be a law. Basically, Cyprus, like 24 other member states, have told the Commission that they have translated this law into national law, so the law should be in place. What we're doing now is we're looking into all the member states and how they translated the legislation. And of course, we will not hesitate where it hasn't been done properly to take member states to the next level and even to the court. I think that what we need to focus on is precisely to ensure that the law is enforced and to deal with what trafficking is really about. Trafficking is not about vulnerability of people. Of course, people are vulnerable to many things, trafficking being one of them. But trafficking happens because there's money and because there is demand. So without people profiting from the services of the victims and using those services of the victims, there is no trafficking. So Cyprus, like all the other member states, needs to pay a lot of attention to these two factors.
Can we come now on to October 18th? That was Anti-Trafficking Day, and it was marked, I think, in Brussels and the rest of Europe. What actually happened to mark the day? And Miria, what was the feeling that you got from the member states about how they are trying to support this initiative?
On the 18th of October, indeed, is the EU Anti-Trafficking Day. We marked the 8th Anti-Trafficking Day. And what we did, we presented a report at the EU level, a package against trafficking in human beings. And it was basically 3 reports. The first one was the midterm report on what we have done in relation to the strategy of the EU against trafficking in the last 2.5 years. So we reported on the policy framework and the implementation. And I'm very proud, having monitored its implementation, that we have indeed implemented all the actions we have promised to present date. We have also presented a report on data, so the latest statistics we have on registered victims from the member states with very interesting results. And we have presented another report on another directive which relates to whether victims of trafficking, how many victims of trafficking are granted a permit to remain in the EU once they're identified as trafficked.
Right, that's the directive on residence permits, I think?
That is the so-called 2004 directive, yes.
Can you elaborate on that a bit? Because that's something I think that's very pertinent to the victims that we have in Cyprus.
Well, it is. What we have is an EU legislation dating back to 2004 that states that non-EU nationals that are identified as victims of trafficking, under certain considerations, can be granted permits to remain in the EU as appropriate. And what we have found with the report that we have issued last week is that the directive is not as used as it could be, as widely used as it could be, and not always in an appropriate manner. So we have to encourage the member states indeed to take actions to ensure better implementation of the directive. So again, it is about implementation rather than necessarily a problem with the law itself.
What can you or the Commission actually do in cases where countries aren't properly implementing the law? I mean, do you have any teeth, as it were, Miriam?
Well, the European Commission certainly has teeth. The language to be using would be, yes, we can launch infringement procedures. In reality, what that means is that the member states could potentially end up going to the court, the European Court of Justice. And of course, when it comes to the issue of trafficking in human beings, I hope that this is not something that we will end up having to do. Number one, because the aim is not to punish the member states for not implementing the law. The aim is to encourage member states to do so, because in doing so, they help people, they help victims. It is in the interest of the EU, of the member states, of you, of me, of the society, and of the victims that the law is implemented. And number two, I don't know, I cannot think of any member states who would like to say that they haven't taken the right steps to prevent human trafficking. This in some ways a form of slavery. And I don't know if member states will want to be seen in that way. And indeed, I think the member states are doing a lot more than they were in the past. I see a lot more awareness, a lot more activity at the member state level, a lot more interest in the work that is being done also at the EU level, more cooperation with the civil society. There is a long road ahead, and I'm not in any way saying that everything is done as it should be. But I do see more work and more interest and more commitment. And also at the EU level, the President-elect, Mr. Juncker, has put trafficking in his political agenda as a priority. Mr. Avramopoulos, who is our Commissioner-elect, he's now the Commissioner of Migration and Home Affairs, who is responsible for the area of trafficking, has already stipulated that trafficking is one of the areas that he will certainly support and promote at the EU level. So we're on the right track, but there's a lot more to be done. And what is also interesting, because you mentioned the 2004 directive, it's very important to remember that most of the victims identified in the EU are EU citizens. So we may want to think that we have a lot of non-EU citizens who are trafficked, and we possibly do. But in reality, most of the victims who are registered with the authorities are EU nationals. Most of the suspected traffickers are EU nationals. And I would estimate that all, if nearly all, of the users are EU nationals. So at the end of the day, it goes back to the demand. Who uses the services of these people? It's us. It's EU nationals.
Miriam, can we just clarify for people exactly what we're talking about here? Because I think the figure is close to 3/4 of trafficked people are trafficked for sexual exploitation. But aren't there, several other categories that we really ought to be aware of? What exactly should we be looking out for?
We have trafficking for sexual exploitation, for labor exploitation, for domestic servitude, for the purpose of organ removal, to force people to engage in criminal activities, forced begging. Unfortunately, we have a very long list. Now we hear also stories about people being forced into sham marriages. So we have a lot of forms of exploitation. And it's very easy to say it has nothing to do with us. It's very easy to turn a blind eye and to say it's a hidden phenomenon. But it is not always hidden. So there's a lot that we can do. We can ask people that we are in any way paying, either through contracts or non-contracts, more informal economy. We can ask them to see their papers, to see, not necessarily their papers, but that they're working there in their own free will. Is there somebody behind them asking them to do the job that they're doing? Is there anything we can do to help them? If we are employing domestic workers, for example, are we sure that these people are not part of a bigger scum? We know that there is trafficking in domestic servitude, actually. We know that there's a lot of people begging in the streets or engaging in criminal activities, and we immediately assume that they are part of some organized gang, but maybe they're victims of an organized network. When it comes to children, for example, sometimes those children are not necessarily in any way related to the people that they're working for, but they're forced to do what they do. Sometimes they're convinced that if they go to the authorities, they will be imprisoned, which of course that shouldn't happen, that they would be punished. So we have to be more alert into what we buy, whose services we're using. When it comes to sexual exploitation, of course, there are people who do things in their own free will and legally or in the regular, less regulated market. But there are many women and girls, especially, who are forced. We see documentaries all the time who expose these things. So it wouldn't be bad to be a little bit more careful into our practices and our habits and not taking for granted that people want to be doing the things they do.
Which brings us to a couple of other things. One is the number of convictions for trafficking. Has that in any way improved?
It is very difficult with the data we have available to compare. We have about 3,500 convictions at the EU level. But if we know that there's potentially tens of thousands of victims, I would assume that there's a lot of convictions that haven't taken place. So we are encouraging and pushing the member states to be doing a lot more in that direction. And you give me the opportunity to say something once more. This is not the European Commission telling the member states, oh, you have to implement EU law. This is about the member states protecting their citizens, protecting people who live in Europe, citizens and non-EU citizens, and protecting the legal economy. Because all this trafficking, also for labor exploitation, for example, comes at the detriment of the legal economy, of the legal businesses going about doing their work. So it hurts the victims, it hurts the society, and it hurts the economy. It hurts everybody. There's nobody who wins apart from the criminals.
And finally, Miria, I seem to recall the last time you were in Cyprus, and I think it was probably around this time last year, the EU Parliament, lobbied by women's groups, had passed a resolution accepting or recommending that in cases of prostitution, the prostitute herself or himself shouldn't be classed as the criminal. Now, what's happened with that? A few countries adopted it. Has it made any difference whatsoever?
There are a number of issues here. First of all, to clarify that when it comes to the policy surrounding prostitution, the Commission has no opinion. It is up to the member states to decide. But what is very clear, and this comes from the law enforcement, from intelligence gathering, from everybody, is that prostitution is a high-risk sector. So you as a journalist, there's a lot of horrible things that can happen to a journalist, but trafficking is not one of them necessarily. When it comes to prostitution, it is extremely likely that is linked to trafficking and organized crime. So to quote a German high-ranking police officer recently, she said,
all the people identified in trafficking for sexual exploitation were in the prostitution market. So that we have to take. The European Commission can act when there is a link between prostitution and trafficking. What the European Parliament says is that in order to ensure that we eradicate demand, we stop the demand, some parliamentarians recommend that we are closer to a model whereby we criminalize the buyers of prostitution. The Commission has absolutely no opinion on that. What the Commission says is that we need to look very carefully. In fact, all the member states, including Cyprus, are legally obliged to consider criminalizing those who knowingly, and I stress knowingly, make use of the services of victims of trafficking. And I want to leave your audience with a question. If we know of any other area of crime, because trafficking in human beings is a crime, where the person is in some way involved or aware of the crime and instigating the crime in any way, and is not criminalized. And we have no other such examples. So if we consider trafficking as a crime, which it is, stipulated in the EU Treaty as well, in the Charter of Fundamental Rights, then we have to think of how we stop the crime. And is the answer, if we don't criminalize the crime, not prostitution, the crime of trafficking for sexual exploitation, for example, if we don't criminalize that, are we suggesting impunity to those involved?
And are we perhaps suggesting that consumers of these basically illegal activities are accessories?
Exactly. So would we accept, for example, if there is a domestic worker, actually a servant, in the sense that someone is trafficked in a house, you know that they're trafficked, you know that you don't pay for the services, or you know that somebody's behind them taking their money, and so on, and you just accept that. You're not criminalized in the majority of member states at the moment. You are criminalized if the person is a third country national, but not if it's an EU national, which is, again, something we need to be thinking about very carefully. So yes, the Commission has a big say when it comes to trafficking for sexual exploitation and how this links to the exploitation of the prostitution of others. But when it comes to pure prostitution policy, we have absolutely no comment, and of course we don't think that prostitution and trafficking are the same thing. This is very clear. But whether there are links, of course there are links.
Miria Vassiliadou, EU Anti-Trafficking Coordinator. Always a pleasure to talk to you. Many thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Rosie, and thank you for all the work in ensuring awareness on the issue and being consistent about it. This is great. Thank you so much.
Well, that about wraps up this edition of the Cyprus News Digest. Many thanks for your company. Hope you'll join me next week. Till we meet again, take care and God bless. Bye-bye now.